Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this September 17, 2014 edition of Nightcast. We'll have a story in tonight's news about the Pope and some travels that are coming up for him in the weeks ahead. But the first story tonight, we want to open with a story out of California, where two wildfires have forced over 1,000 people to evacuate. California had forced over 1,000 people to evacuate their homes. Here's that opening story.
The fire was spotting well ahead of itself, and that dry vegetation is just igniting very readily and very easily. So 3 years of drought, everything is ready to burn.
I mean, it was devastating. The people across the street, they were told to get out now. All they have is the clothes on their back and their children's backs. And she was over here saying, my home is just destroyed. The house up there is no big deal, you know, it can be rebuilt, but this is my family church, you know.
I feel bad for the people who are probably going to be out of work for a long time. I mean, this is already economically depressed area anyway, but it could have been a lot worse.
Okay, friends, and we will have updates on what's happening in Scotland with the referendum voting, which will finish up tomorrow. And by tomorrow night, we'll know the outcome on that. But we've got some updates on the rallies and the goings-on there with all that. And we've got stories on the Ukraine. We've got the boots on the ground story from the president that we'll be giving you later in the program. You know, last night, top U.S. general recommended that if the airstrike strategy failed, that he'd be talking to the president about boots on the ground. But the president, you'll hear what the president had to say in a video a little bit later in the program. But now I want to tell you about this story that relates to the first seal. Let's just put our chart up on the screen real quickly for a moment. You know, Jesus Christ expounded in plain language the meaning of the seals of revelation that were sealed until these latter days, opened up by Jesus Christ and revealed through his end-time servant, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong. And we'll go over these seals in a moment, but this first seal, the white horse, was one that Christ said, many will come in my name, saying that I am Christ, and yet will deceive many. So we'll just go over that first seal for now, and we'll go into this first story related to that first seal. The president's going, the Pope, he'll actually be greater than the president in a way, and greater than the emperor, whom he will be crowning. Whether, maybe not this Pope, might be another one, it could be this Pope. The way things are escalating, unless there's a change of popes, you know, may have to be this Pope. Maybe not, though. We don't know who's going to do the crowning of a future emperor of the revived Holy Roman Empire, but we do know that's coming, and it's coming, the way news is going, it's coming soon. But let me quote you the man who's telling about where the Pope's going. He says, on behalf of the EPP group in the European Parliament, I would like to express my profound joy over the announcement of Pope Francis' visit to the European Parliament, and to thank, now, friends, I'm quoting him, and right here in the quote, he's going to say, His Holiness, for accepting our invitation. That was a statement made by the chairman of the EPP group in the EP, the EP being the European Parliament. That's what Manfred Weber said. Let me tell you, our reporter saying yesterday, but this report comes from September 11. But before I go further with this report and another one that I have related to this, let's jump ahead to a scripture. And referred to the Pope as His Holiness. You know, many people call the Pope Papa or Father. And I've got a verse I'm going to put forward on the screen that tells us, in calling the Pope Papa or Father in the sense of a religious or spiritual term, verse 9 of Matthew 23 says, "And call no man you upon the earth your father, for one is your Father which is in heaven." Now again, friend, that's speaking of calling someone father in the sense of a religious title. And, you know, certainly okay to call your human father the role he's in as your human father, you know, dad, your father. But in a spiritual sense, we're to call no man father, as that verse 9 from Matthew 23 explains. And, you know, it even goes further. If you go a verse ahead of that, in verse 8 of Matthew 23, it even tells us, it actually doesn't tell us not to call anybody a rabbi, but it tells those who are in certain positions to not be called rabbi, meaning master. For one is your master, even Christ, and all you are brethren. And while we're on that subject, let's hit another couple verses I pulled out. Verse 10 also says, "Neither be you called masters, for one is your master, even Christ." And you know, we have in college institutions, they give you out a master's degree, you know, as if you are a master, and they give out a doctorate degree, you know. And if we apply the principle of these verses, maybe we should even call no man a doctor, except maybe some in a medical profession. But otherwise, when it comes to master, Christ said, don't call anybody a master. Maybe we shouldn't call them a doctor or this or that, or either of some study that they've done. "But he that is great among you shall be your servant," is where Christ goes with this in verse 11 of Matthew 23. And he expounds that further if you want to go further. But we got a lot of news tonight, friends, and I just wanted to hit the highlights on that. Let's go back and let me finish this story of the Pope who's going to visit the European Parliament. And the chairman of the EPP group thanks him for accepting their invitation. With this visit to the representatives of 500 million European cities, Pope Francis is sending a strong pro-European signal, reminding everyone of the Christian roots of our continent, the chairman says. He says, "I'm looking forward to welcoming," and he keeps referring to him as His Holiness, and there's none holy but one, and that's the Father. They're looking forward to welcoming this Pope to the European Parliament. The official visit will take place on November 25, 2014, in Strasbourg. On this occasion, the Pope will address members of the European Parliament during a formal session. The EPP group is the largest political group in the European Parliament, with 220 members from 27 member states. And friends, I pulled another report related to this. This news report is September 12, 5 days ago, this report. Pope Francis will travel to Strasbourg to speak before the European Parliament. All right, that's the same thing I just told you in the last report. The source of this report is the Archdiocese of Sydney. It's part of the Catholic Communications of Sydney, of the Sydney Archdiocese. The Vatican has confirmed that Pope Francis will speak before the European Parliament in Strasbourg on November 25 during its plenary assembly. The President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, who actually met with the Pope last year in October, announced that the Pope had accepted his invitation. The visit is being described as a symbolic gesture that is very significant, especially since Europe has become increasingly secular. German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, who serves as the President's Bishops' Conference of Europe, of the European Community, welcomed the idea, adding that it will be a good way for the Parliament to remember its Christian roots. November will be a busy month for the Pope. He's also tentatively scheduled to travel to Turkey at the end of November. Back on October 8, 1988, John Paul became the first pope to speak before the European Parliament. So this is not a first for this pope. Again, John Paul II became the first pope to speak before the European Parliament. At the time, the Berlin Wall in 1988 was still divided, was still up. It still divided Germany, and ultimately communism still divided Europe. Using symbolism, the Pope reminded the Parliament that Europe should learn to breathe with two lungs, with one same body. But the session, now we're talking about the 1988 session now, that session didn't start off with, or did start off with an unexpected disturbance when Parliament member Ian Paisley from Northern Ireland interrupted the Pope yelling anti-popal slogans from the Protestant Reformation. "I call you to order and I ask you to stop this disturbance," was some of the quotes from that 1988 Parliament meeting. I'm going to pull this forward for just a moment there, friends, as we look ahead to November 25 when the Pope plans to travel. Maybe not by a white horse, but that's a symbol of the first seal, when he plans to travel to Strasbourg and appear before the European Parliament. Okay, all right, I had fun combining that. Horse is from one of the World Tomorrow programs, and I took the Pope, the painting, the mural of the Pope on that wall near the Vatican, and I combined those two into one graphic there. So just to show you where that came from, I'll back that up for a moment. Show you the murals. Here's the full mural that's painted on a wall near the Vatican. Here's a close-up shot. Somebody painted the Pope flying through the air as Superman, and the Vatican must have liked it because they tweeted it. Now, this happened back in January, early this year in January. So there you go. And then I took that mural picture, and as I mentioned to you a moment ago, I put it together on the... I used to work in the television department, and I used to help line up the graphics because part of my job, I created a department called the promotion department. When I came to college as a freshman, I'd worked at 3 television stations before, before I came to college, full-time job in television stations. And I had some background in television, and when I asked Mr. Norman Smith one day, I said, "Mr. Smith," I says, "why aren't we sending out 30-second promos and videotape promos and little 10-second slides to each station on which we are contracted to running our program?" And he said, "Well, what do you mean? How much would that cost us?" I said, "That's normally included in your contract." He said, "It is?" I said, "Normally it is. That's a normal part of most contracts with most stations, where you buy a half hour of time, you get 52 10-second. Oh no, it's 104 10-second slides and either 26 or 52 30-second videos that they'll schedule throughout the week. You know, some of them in the middle of the night, some of them in the middle of the day, some of them wind up sometimes in prime time. And he said, well, didn't know about that. He says, I'll tell our advertising department, tell Mr. Armstrong, we'll check into it. He got right back to me, and he says, you know, you were right. He says, we got, I don't know how many hundred stations we had then, he said, but it's in every one of our contracts. They checked them all. It's in every one of our contracts. And he says, guess what your job is going to be from now on? Now, I was a student, a full-time student, but they allowed us to work up to 20 hours a week as a student. And with my 20 hours a week, Mr. Smith gave me the job of starting the promotion department inside the television studio. And my job was to put together those 30-second videotape promos and those 10-second slides, to have the artwork done for those slides. So I'd go see the videos, and oftentimes we'd take clips out of the actual half-hour program to make the 30-second videotape promo, but for the 10-second slide, that at that time they had to be mounted in little metal sleeves and so on, I'd go see the art director, and I'd go through what the program that we needed the promo about was, and together we'd brainstorm an idea, and he'd sit there and pencil up something and draw it, and it was up to me. I'd say, yeah, that'll work with, and then I also had a copyright person. I didn't write the copy. I'd go work with the copyright person. He'd look at what the program was about, and he'd come up with a 10-second. Now, you know, you got to really choose the words carefully to say what you want to say in 10 seconds and say this program coming on Sunday at such and such a time on our station is going to be about this or that. And so I'd work with that copywriter. He'd also make the 30-second copy for the video tape. And I'd take that copy to the art director. We'd sit down together and say, okay, here's our copy, and here's a couple, 3 alternatives. And he'd say, outline something, and I got to pick. Yeah, that looks good to me. Let's go with this one. Let's go with this copy. That was my job, you know, and Mr. Smith was happy with me making the decisions on that, and then we'd mail those out to hundreds of stations, and then eventually that grew into a situation where when I was asked to go up to summer camp and help run a dancing program, I had to train people to take over what I did, and they. Do you know it took two full-time people to do what I was doing in 20 hours a week? And because they hired a man from an advertising department to come in and be able to cover me when I'd be gone for the summer. He was full-time. And he said, I can't do this by myself in 40 hours. So they hired him somebody else to work with him. And then I think somebody else, too. So it eventually wound up being 3 people to cover what I was doing. Of course, when I came back from the summer, they told me I expected to come back and work there in the TV studio again. They said, sorry, you left. You know, we don't have an opening for you here now. But that worked out fine because I was asked to teach the dance class over at Imperial Schools and that year, high school. And all friends, all right, we got to get on with news. I got a lot of news tonight. I'm sorry, I got reminiscing. I may not include this in the archive, but I'm telling you about that because I worked with an art director and I was able to pop this little thing together. I took the mural of the Pope on that wall and slid him over onto this horse and erased the bottom part of it and put it together so that we got Pope Francis riding that white horse from the first seal of that Mr. Armstrong would use in the World Tomorrow program. But I wanted to tell you some of my background that maybe some of you will say, okay, Steve, with your background in television and having helped put together some of the artwork graphic for the promotion of the World Tomorrow program, maybe you can get away with using some of the artwork from the TV studio. And and put it together like this. Now, I know there's probably a couple of people out there who would really chew me out for altering anything, but some of you people don't realize I did have a job in the past that allowed me to make decisions about artwork and things like that. Anyway, there's more. No, okay, not more to that story, but we're on to another story next. Scotland. There are plenty of questions about what will happen if the majority of people in Scotland vote yes in the referendum that will conclude its voting tomorrow. But there are also plenty of examples of relatively new independent nations. One country that is now two nations is the former Czechoslovakia. But as you're going to hear in this video, that didn't work out so hot, really. You divide, you conquer. It's going to be Leviticus 26:19. If that yes comes out, it's going to work out to be God allowed people to act foolishly and accomplish what he prophesied would happen if people don't obey their Creator. Blessings if they do, that fill up half the first chapter of Leviticus 26, one blessing after another, followed by if you don't obey your Creator, just the opposite of the blessings, and then if you still refuse, your cursings will be 7 times the more. Verse 18, Leviticus 26, God says, and if you will not yet, after he's done the curses, after you don't obey him, and then if you will not yet for all this, for all the curses that he brought on you, hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more. Friends, I've had a little bit of a end of summer cold that came with a virus I caught last week, so I'm losing my voice just for a moment. Verse 19, you can read it yourself. It says, and I will break the pride of your powers. And that's what will happen. It's to the UK after tomorrow. It'll be a breaking of the pride and the reality of the power of the UK if that yes vote goes through. It's now 21 years since Czechoslovakia was divided into 2 sovereign states in what was dubbed the Velvet Divorce. Robert Cameron reports from Prague on what lessons can be learned from the Czechoslovakian example.
Prague, seat of kings, emperors and presidents for 10 centuries, a Baroque stage set for many a historical drama and a meeting point between East and West. But since 1993, also the capital of a much reduced country. At the stroke of midnight on December the 31st, 1992, Czechoslovakia simply ceased to exist. Now with a peaceful divorce. And astonishingly, the decision to divide it without a referendum had been taken just 5 months earlier. Leading the talks for the Czech side was Prime Minister, later President, Václav Klaus.
It is very easy to divide a country.
But not so easy. There was a dispute over the gold reserves that lasted until 2000.
No. This is exactly, you are not now using the wrong arguments. It is very easy to divide the country. The number of people in the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic is 2-1. Everything is divided 2-1. Stop.
Podívejte se pozorně, jak kolkované bankovky vypadají.
But that simple equation couldn't be applied everywhere. A temporary currency union collapsed after just 6 weeks, and the Slovak currency devalued massively. But in Bratislava, despite their rocky start, the Slovaks have caught up.
In time of division, Slovak GDP per capita in PPP was 62% of Czech GDP per capita. Just now, a few days ago, Eurostat announced that Slovakia has the same GDP per capita as Czech Republic.
What are we to lose? Today, Czechs and Slovaks regard their velvet divorce as a success. But that doesn't mean there isn't nostalgia for Czechoslovakia.
Of course, nowadays everybody's happy that it happened that way. It happened that there was no war or something. But still, there are a few things which are still there in my mind that this was not correct, you know, in some way.
Comparisons with Scotland? Well, unlike the Czechs and Slovaks, the voice of the Scottish people will be heard. Rob Cameron, BBC News, Prague.
Friends, I've got a video that will show you some of the rallies that are going on in Scotland now, rallying for yes and other rallies rallying for a no. But before we do that, I've got a little animation video. As the build-up to the vote continues, this animation takes a look at Scotland by the numbers compared to other European countries and the US.
Treat this as your pub quiz preparation for a round called Scotland by Numbers. Might never happen, but best be prepared. Scotland's surface area is just over 73,000 square kilometres. In European terms, an independent Scotland would be mid-table, above Ireland and below the Czech Republic. If we were to become a US state, unlikely I know, we'd be the 41st biggest, just a smidge weir than South Carolina. But we'd probably not fit in. Gun ownership here runs at just over 5 per 100 people. In the US, it's 89. In population terms, we'd be a bit further down the European rankings, snugly nestling between Slovakia and Norway. But it's probably population density that picks Scotland out. England has 371 people per square kilometre. Scotland has just 68. Mind you, it's like Oxford Circus compared to Iceland, which can only muster 3 folk per square kilometre. Roomy. So who are these relatively widely spaced Scots? Well, they are increasingly older. The last census was the first where we had more over 65s than under 15s. We're more diverse than we were, with 4% of Scots identifying themselves as other than white in the 2011 census. But England is far more diverse. The figure there is 14%. And ask yourself this, are we happy? Well, given the torn-faced expression of many commuters this morning, it may surprise you to know that we are very near the top of the European subjective well-being charts, with only Switzerland and Denmark scoring higher. So cheer yourself up even further with that. Just don't expect celebratory gunfire.
Okay, friends, now, as Scotland prepares to go to the polls tomorrow, the yes and no campaigns have spent the day today making their final push for votes. Scotland's First Minister Alex Salmond has urged people to take their country's future in their hands and vote yes. The former Prime Minister Gordon Brown told no voters to hold their heads up high. As the campaign enters its final hours, the latest polls continue to suggest that the outcome is just too close to call. Nick Robinson reports.
They believe this is their time, their moment in history. They believe he is about to deliver for them. Alex Salmond is already First Minister of a country with its own parliament. Tonight he told voters it was time to take the next step, as this could be their last chance to do it.
We can write a new chapter in the story of this ancient nation. It's the best opportunity we shall ever have to enshrine the things that we cherish most. Principles of equality, of social justice, a national health service properly funded and always in public hands.
It was time, he said, for Scotland to believe in itself.
The Westminster parties agreed to it because they thought they had it in the bag. They thought all they had to do was agree to it, see off Scotland, and then it wouldn't matter. And therefore we can have no assurance that we would ever have such a chance again. This is our opportunity of a lifetime, and we must seize it with both hands. So let's get to it, and let's do it now.
At times it's felt in this campaign as if the passion only existed when it came with the word yes. But this was the day the No campaign seemed to discover its passion, its self-belief and its defiance. captured not by the Scottish leaders of Labour, the Lib Dems and the Tories, who've united to back the union, but by a young trainee surgeon called Vicky.
I was born in an NHS hospital, and like most of you here today, I have the NHS to thank for saving the life of a loved one. I would not be here today if it wasn't for the lies I've been told by the SNP. They're telling it to every one of us.
This was also the day Gordon Brown, so long a tense, a brooding presence on the sidelines, roared back into action. His aim to rouse what he's convinced is the silent majority.
Tell them this is our Scotland. This is not their flag, their country, their culture, their streets. This is everyone's flag, everyone's country, everyone's culture, and everyone's street.
Independence, he said, was an economic minefield. What stirred him, what stirred the crowd, though, was his claim that it was a betrayal of his country's values.
What kind of message does Scotland send to the world if tomorrow we said we're going to give up on sharing, we're going to smash our partnership, we're going to abandon cooperation and conflict, and we're going to throw the idea of solidarity into the dust?
If you don't know, the former Prime Minister told the undecided, the answer has to be no.
We've had no answers. They are leading us into a trap. The only answer for Scotland's sake and for Scotland's future is vote no.
Friends, you know, my dad is Scot-Irish, and he comes from the old Campbell clan on his side of the family, and I hope you guys in Scotland, I hope you'll vote no and stay in the UK. Keep what's left of what was Great Britain as great as possible as we go down, as things go down. But friends, you know, God himself may be involved on this one. We read the prophecy a moment ago, and it depends, a lot of things depend on how people as individuals are doing for their own blessings, and how their nation is doing depends on the sum total of all individuals within a given nation. The referendum campaign is being closely watched by the business community in Pakistan, where they've been having all the flooding. And Pakistan is the place where traditional bagpipes and kilts are made. The country's now the second biggest producer excuse me, of the instrument in the world, and manufacturers in the country of Pakistan seem to favor a no vote tomorrow. Salcott business owner Faisal Naeem explains why.
We have been in business for more than 50 years now. This is our family business, and it started off with my grandfather, and he started off the business even before partition, when British people were in subcontinent. We are making bagpipes, kilts, uniforms, which involves socks, shoes, flashes, shirts, hats. So basically it's everything. All the outfits which Scottish people wear, we are making them. Bagpipe business and accessories, we sell around 60 to 70% in Scotland directly. Rest of the world is around 20-30%, but mainly we focus on Scotland. Actually, I'm quite concerned about the referendum because my customers are also concerned. If Scotland becomes independent, might create some problems if they increase the taxation or increase the import duties. And we are not sure about the currency as well. If sterling is going to stay the same as it is now, or they're going to convert into euros, we are really not sure about it. If I had the right to vote, I would vote no, because I love the way it is now. I love Scotland as it is being a part of England. I enjoy doing business with Scotland. I enjoy doing everything in Scotland. I am always in Scotland every 2-3 months. So I would love to see tourist industry flourish and stay the same as it is now.
Friends, let's go on now to what's happening in the rest of Europe. The Ukraine votes on agreement to strengthen ties with the EU.
It was the moment that sparked a crisis, when the Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign a deal with the European Union, opting instead for closer ties with Moscow. The fallout was huge, resulting in mass protests, the overthrow of the president and a dangerous war in the east of the country which has killed thousands. 10 months on, and this.
За 355 рішення прийнято. Вітаю!
Celebrations in the Ukrainian and European parliaments after that agreement was agreed and ratified, although the free trade aspects have been delayed for now to appease Russia. Earlier in the day and behind closed doors, the Ukrainian parliament approved a bill granting limited self-rule to parts of Donetsk and Luhansk. It includes the promise of local elections and an amnesty for some rebel fighters, although that amnesty will not apply to those accused of grave crimes, including rebels suspected of shooting down flight MH17 back in July. But many Ukrainian politicians have voiced their fury, describing the bill as a sell-off of the country in what they see as a war against Russia. And there are no guarantees this latest move will bring peace to the east. One rebel leader has told the BBC that he and others will continue to push for full independence and closer ties with Moscow, not Kiev. All the while, and despite a fragile ceasefire, fresh fighting has claimed more lives, more families continuing to bear the personal cost of this crisis. Alpa Bitel, BBC News.
Okay, friends, we've got another story related to the Ukraine crisis. You're going to see something in this video that I wish Ken Evans were watching tonight. It may make you. This is one that may make you laugh a little bit, especially when you understand all of the ramifications about it. A politician. Let me tell you this first before I tell you what happened to him. A politician has told Ukrainian television he needs to recover morally, physically, and psychologically after being dumped into a rubbish bin. Footage from yesterday showed Vitaly Zarabsky, Economic Development Party deputy and former advisor to ousted Ukrainian President Yanukovych, you'll see this in this video, he's being held down by a mob outside Parliament, held down in a rubbish bin, a dumpster bin. Mr. Zuravsky authored a bill in January severely tightening restrictions on anti-government protesters. Now, I believe you're going to hear in this report that he's considered pro-Russia. The BBC's David Stern explains how this rubbish bin incident unfolded.
He is a deputy and in Parliament, as you say, a part of a party that is seen to be pro-Russian. But in particular, the emotions are running high because Parliament was set to vote on a vetting law, an anti-corruption, it's called lustration law, which people hope will be able to cleanse the government of corrupt politicians, of holdovers from President Viktor Yanukovych's administration and other politicians. And this crowd felt that Mr. Zuravsky was one of the people that they need to cleanse. In fact, they put these bins outside of the Parliament for this particular reason, or symbolically saying that they needed to throw politicians into the trash. In this case, they actually did that to one politician in particular. But I think what we need to keep in mind is this really shows the emotions surrounding the issue and surrounding, indeed, the entire issue of corruption in Ukraine.
Okay, friends, we got a little bit more video on the situation in the Ukraine. I thought I had to show you this one tonight, though. This is a classic here. In this next video, friends, we'll hear from BBC World Affairs correspondent Paul Adams, who is reporting on what's presently going on in the Ukraine.
A celebration of sorts. Rebel fighters parading through Luhansk on Sunday to mark City Day. But this is not a city with much to celebrate. Across Luhansk, people are finding help where they can. There's no water or electricity, so this soup kitchen serves hundreds of meals a day. Anatoly thanks Vladimir Putin for helping the people of Luhansk, but he's pessimistic.
Some say
the fighting could start again tomorrow, he says, that there'll be bombing again. No one is saying tomorrow will be better. In the nearby market, there's only one stall. Salaries and pensions haven't been paid for months. People aren't starving, but after weeks of bombardment and siege, Luhansk is not yet back on its feet. A large convoy of Russian aid arrived at the weekend. It included food, but these boxes are full of bandages and tourniquets, preparations perhaps for the fighting still to come. For the worst affected areas, you have to drive to the villages outside Luhansk. This is Ryazhevatoye, where almost every home has been hit. The Ukrainian army shelled this place for weeks. The water truck only started coming 4 days ago, bringing relief to those thirsty villagers who haven't already fled. Alexander makes several round trips. He and his family spent weeks hiding in their basement while bombs fell all around. They don't have relatives in Russia, so they don't have anywhere else to go. The hardest thing now, he says, is to rebuild and find work. The factories have closed and he doesn't have a job. The wreckage caused by weeks of fighting is absolutely everywhere in this village, and it's not just in the bombed out houses. It's in things like this wreck of an armoured vehicle. And if you look around the ground here, it's absolutely littered with spent bullets. This place wasn't just bombed from the air, it was also the scene of some intense close quarters fighting. At Lutugane, south of Luhansk, a scene of even greater destruction. A retreating Ukrainian army convoy was caught here 2 weeks ago, every vehicle incinerated. The precise circumstances are unclear, but this was ferocious expert work. Some say Russian helicopters were involved. A reminder that if the ceasefire collapses totally, Ukraine's powerful neighbour won't simply stand by and watch. Paul Adams, BBC News, Eastern Ukraine.
First, we go now to the news story out of Thailand. You know, last night we told you that the news reports last night were saying that British tourists had been eliminated as suspects. But then today's report is going a little differently. Police investigating the murders of those 2 British tourists in Thailand have said 2 Britons are possible suspects and will face questioning. The 2 young people who were brutally killed, and friends, I hate to tell you, none of the reports have been saying this, but I was reading some additional reports on this, and they were killed with a garden hoe. They were hacked to death with a garden hoe. Hannah Witheridge, 23, and David Miller, 24, were found dead on a beach on the island of Koh Tao on Monday this week, hacked to death with a garden hoe. Yesterday, the news said they didn't believe any British people were, they were expecting this to come from some Asians, that they supposedly had some kind of evidence tying it in, believing it was Asians. You'll see this video in a moment. 2 British men who spent time with the victims in the days before the 2 young people died are now in police care in Bangkok. Police said the men had not been formally detained or arrested, but had been prevented from leaving Thailand. Jonathan Head has the full report on this.
The police are still here in force on Koh Tao, searching for evidence at the spot where Hannah Witheridge and David Miller died. But this crime scene was never sealed off. It's unlikely they'll find much now. Instead, they believe forensic examination of their bodies will give them what they need to track down the killer. British Embassy officials were invited to the police hospital in Bangkok to hear what progress they're making. They're also now holding 2 British men for questioning. Christopher Ware, seen here with police officers in Bangkok, and his brother James, spent time with the 2 victims in the days before they were killed. Christopher Ware was questioned by police on Monday, but then allowed to leave the island. But the Thai authorities are still looking into the possibility that the killer could be a local man. They are continuing to question Burmese workers on Koh Tao. All options appear to be open.
With the information we have, I think we can identify the murderer. However, we must wait for the test results to come out.
3 days on, and you do get the sense now of an investigation that's kicking into a higher gear. But after some pretty mixed messages from the police, you have to wonder whether opportunities and perhaps even evidence to help solve the crime might have been missed. Thailand's tourist industry has already been hit hard this year by political turmoil. These horrific murders are another blow. The pressure is on the Thai police to solve this crime quickly and credibly. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Koh Tao, Thailand.
And friends, I included this story under the fourth seal of Revelation because the fourth seal, Jesus Christ described it in plain language in three different activities. He described it as loimos, the primary thing, meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. He also described it as seismos, something that would happen between the third and fifth seal, so that only pegs out on the fourth seal. And seismos meaning seismic activity, commotions in the air such as gale force winds of all kinds, commotions on the ground such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, floodings, wildfires, any commotion of a seismic nature on the ground. And he also mentioned in Mark 13 verse 8, terake, meaning troubled waters or disturbances, mobs, seditions, trouble, just trouble, but not the mega trouble of the next seal, the fifth seal, the great trouble, the mega trouble, the great tribulation, which is the next major event in prophecy to happen. But in terms of trouble and troubles, that last story, we related it to that. Now we're keeping an eye on things happening in Asia, because, friends, in the round two of World War, we had two theaters. We had the European theater and we had the Pacific theater. And so we keep a good eye on what's developing and happening around the Asian theater. China's President Xi Jinping is due in India for a key visit with his first meeting with newly elected Prime Minister Narendra Modi. President Xi begins the visit in Mr. Modi's home state and is expected to announce major Chinese investment during the course of his visit. The BBC's Sanjoy Majumdar reports on how the two Asian rivals are approaching this summit.
India is looking to welcome the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a great admirer of China, and he wants it to invest in India to turn this country into a manufacturing hub and create more jobs for his economy. This ties in quite well with China's own economic strategy, especially as it faces a host of problems back home.
I think with the labor costs increasing in China and environmental degradation and a host of other political disturbances, in this background, China also wants to shift some of its manufacturing sector to other countries.
China is also looking to assert its own position as a global power, especially as it tries to check the growing US influence in the region.
The Chinese are also looking at the US rebalancing strategy in the Asia Pacific and approaching this through their own concept of maritime Silk Road, in which they needed India's support because India is a resident Indian Ocean state, and so they needed that support from India. So the maritime Silk Road is basically to counter the US rebalancing and to assert the Chinese leadership role in this power transition at the global and regional levels.
So there's a lot to gain for both sides. It's not going to be easy. The two sides have a bitter history, dating back to the 1960s when China defeated India in a border war. And while China is close to India's rival Pakistan, Delhi has been making overtures to Japan. Still, there are many here who hope that the two leaders can chart a new course.
Okay, friends, now I told you last night about the exploding pavements in London, in England, but we weren't able to show you the video last night. Well, I've got it for tonight. This video was just released. It's closed-circuit television video that was just released Monday evening when England was holding a probe of the electrical network. They questioned them Monday night, and they released this closed-circuit video from July that shows two delivery van drivers who had a lucky escape when a pavement exploded in central London. Again, this explosion was in July, and this July closed-circuit television footage released Monday night by Westminster City Council showed the incident, which happened near Piccadilly Circus. Council officials were questioning energy bosses from Ofgem and the UK Power Network Monday evening over the growing problem of pavement explosions across the capital. Chris Rogers has this report that relates to the Pale Horse, disturbances, trouble, and that kind of thing.
It's just before 11 p.m. on Wednesday, July the 2nd. Piccadilly is still buzzing with people. Delivery men are unloading goods to shops and restaurants, ready for the next day's business. Something suspicious appears to force one driver to reverse his van away. Another, just ahead of him, is oblivious as he continues unloading, making a dash for it just in time. This CCTV footage was released by Westminster Council to highlight its concerns over London's exploding pavements.
It was actually very frightening because it's very near and the fire was really, really big. The fire kept coming out, even though it comes from the manhole.
Can you go back a bit more, please?
Were people panicking?
A lot of them, they were running, they don't know what to do.
You're very conscious when you're walking on the pavement now?
Yeah, actually, especially in the evenings.
CCTV and amateur footage captures the pedestrians, cyclists and drivers escaping death and serious injury across London.
Oh my God!
The number of pavement explosions is rising at an alarming rate. Figures obtained from the Health and Safety Executive reveal there were 49 explosions in 2013. The incident in Piccadilly was the 64th so far this year. So what's causing our pavements to explode? Well, it seems to be water droplets or even gas reaching exposed cables underneath manhole covers like this one. Just a small spark can lead to a huge explosion, particularly if it comes into contact with gas. And there is one simple solution to this. It's called sand. It insulates cables, absorbs water, and starves fire-fueling oxygen. UK Power Networks, the company that brings electricity through London, and its watchdog Ofgem, are under increasing pressure to safeguard Londoners.
There are a number of solutions, including putting sand into the chambers, but also having perforations in the covers. So there's a combination of measures, and we are very pleased with the way UKPN are accelerating that work.
UKPN say they're investing £10 million a year upgrading their cable networks. But a fear remains among Londoners and councils that a danger remains beneath our feet, that can strike at any time in almost any place. Chris Rogers, BBC London News.
Friends, we told you last night we showed you video last night about how General Dempsey spoke in Washington saying that if the airstrikes weren't effective against the IS, against ISIL, as he put it, he'd have to be suggesting to the president that they put U.S. troops on the ground, boots on the ground in Iraq and Syria. Speaking to troops at the Central Command headquarters in Tampa, Florida, however, President Obama said the United States should support Iraqi forces on the ground to secure their future of their own country. Wait a minute. He says they should support the Iraqi forces on the ground, but he's going to say no boots from the United States. No combat boots from the United States here in this video.
Now, going forward, as I announced last week, we're going to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy. And whether in Iraq or in Syria, these terrorists will learn the same thing that the leaders of al-Qaeda already know. We mean what we say. Our reach is long. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven. We will find you eventually. But, and this is something I want to emphasize, this is not and will not be America's fight alone. One of the things we've learned over this last decade is America can make a decisive difference. But I want to be clear. The American forces that have been deployed to Iraq do not and will not have a combat mission. They will support Iraqi forces on the ground as they fight for their own country against these terrorists. As your Commander-in-Chief, I will not commit you and the rest of our armed forces to fighting another ground war in Iraq. After a decade of massive ground deployments, it is more effective to use our unique capabilities in support of partners on the ground so they can secure their own country's futures. And that's the only solution that will succeed over the long term. We'll use our air power. We will train and equip our partners. We will advise them and we will assist them. We will lead a broad coalition of countries who have a stake in this fight, because this is not simply America versus ISIL. This is the people of the region fighting against ISIL. It is the world rejecting the brutality of ISIL in favor of a better future for our children and our children's children, all of them.
And friends, that's it for our report tonight on this Wednesday evening. Just closing with this mention that thousands of people are still thought to be stranded in Indian-administered Kashmir nearly 2 weeks after devastating floods there, where at least 200 people have died, with many missing, and there are mounting fears of disease spreading as criticism grows of the government's response there in that area. Friends, God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Thursday evening, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.